Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at a relatively unusual hinge. You certainly don't find out that these exist, the first year of your door hardware career, but they do exist. This is an unequal leaf hinge, and this video is going to talk about what it is and where you will certainly use the hinge. This client ordered 3 of these, so we're going to have 3 hinges and 3 packages of screws naturally. Let's get a look at what this hinge is. And you're immediately going to recognize that it looks unusual. Okay. It looks unusual because it's an unequal leaf hinge, meaning the 2 leaves are not equal. They are unequal. So this is a Hager BB1279. It is a hinge that is 5-inch by 4.5-inch. Okay, so what this is what this is called. This will be 4.5-inch wide. Okay, so it's a custom hinge all the way around. It's basically a 5 by 4.5-inch hinge that's unequal leaf. So 5 and 4.5 isn't the size. It's a 5-inch by 4.5-inch hinge that is unequal leaf. One leaf happens to be 5-inch tall. The other leaf happens to be 4.5-inch tall. So the question becomes, where in the world would you use this? Well, it's not by design that you would use this. It would be a situation where there was an error. Generally, no one has ever designed, that I'm aware of, a new installation with an unequal leaf hinge. Where this hinge is used is when simply you have a frame prepped for 5-inch or a frame prepped for 4.5-inch, and you have a door prep for 5-inch or a door prep for 4.5-inch. You've got one size on the door frame and the other size on the door or frame. How this can happen would be just a mistake, a simple mistake. You were supposed to send, the spec called out for 5-inch hinges on doors wider, 3'6" and wider. Okay, that's common. 3 or wider than 3.0, but generally 3'6" and wider for sure is my cutoff. And if it was 16 gauge, I would go anything larger than 3.0. But the spec called out for 5-inch hinges, 5-inch tall hinges on a 3'6" or wider. You've got 3'6" doors on the job. The frames went out; they were all correct. The frames went out 90 days before the doors, or the frames went out in, and this is a real world scenario, the frames went out in November of any given year, and then all of a sudden for the next 4 months it's oppressively cold. They can't install the frames. So in Chicago we've had years where you literally had to wait till the spring to get frames, to get the mason to install the frames, and by that time information gets lost. You then send out in June of the following year regular doors prepped for 4.5-inch hinges. Okay, and you send the hardware, and let's say the hardware is correct, and they get the 5-inch tall hinges, and they say, well, they fit into the frame, but they don't fit into the door so well. Okay, the problem there is you're faced with new doors. That's not practical because the client doesn't have 6 weeks. Or you can get your hand on some of these hinges. And this will save the day in that sort of situation, assuming the client and everyone accepts it. The reason that the 5-inch tall hinge is used is because for that 1/2 inch of additional height on this hinge leaf, it is shown to be about 20% greater capable of handling the wider aspect of the 3'6" door. A tall inch hinge is going to handle a wider and heavier door better. So I did a job maybe in the first year of my career. The client called out 5 by 4.5. I didn't understand at that very early part of my career that the height was the first dimension. I sent out the doors, I sent out the frames, all prepped with 4.5 inch tall, and then I sent out 4.5 by 5 inch hinges that are wide throw. And the client says, there is a problem. The spec calls out 5 inch hinges, but you sent out 4.5 inch hinges. And I realized, and while this is not the same scenario as needing an unequal leaf, it's the same scenario and the possibility of there being an honest mistake. I then understood the only possible solution to why the client got what they got is because I didn't understand that the height was the first dimension. Okay, hinges run the opposite of how doors run. Hinges run where the height is the first dimension and the width is the second dimension, but on doors, the width is the first dimension. So I thought hinges were sized just like doors. To me, it was logical at the time. It no longer is logical that it would be sized as such, because the height, what's the most important, the paramount of the two dimensions on a door? The width, probably. How wide is the opening going to be? The height is less critical in the sense of the width is going to be tied very much to code, to egress code, to handicap compliant code. The height, you know, as long as you don't get below 80 inch and 78 inch with a door closer attached, you don't really have much of a problem with height. You can have a 7-foot door, you can have an 8-foot door, you can have a 12-foot door. But the width is super important. Well, on a hinge, because of what I had said earlier about the height of the hinge being really more crucial when it comes to doing the job the hinge is expected to do, the height is the first dimension, and it's my opinion. That's why it's the first dimension, because it's the more important of the two dimensions. Even though the width is very important, the height is what I need to know first, because the height will tell me, how am I prepping the door and frame? If I'm prepping it for a 5-inch hinge, I need to know that. But I really care less if it's a 5x5 or a 5x4.5 or a 5x8. I don't really necessarily care about that when I'm prepping the door and frame, even though I need to know that information. The point being is the first dimension, in my opinion, is the more important of the two dimensions. So, how is it that this hinge can save the day? Well, if you look at hinge location charts, and let's switch to the screen view and let's look at some hinge location charts. Now, this is the item that we're looking at here, and by the time you're seeing this video, the layout of the site is likely going to be different. But under Contact Us, under Video Gallery, at least where it is currently, go to page 2 and then do a find function for hinge location. Control F, hinge location, like I'm doing here. You'll find a hinge location chart. You'll find, you know, there's going to be lots of them that exist, but this is a hinge location chart that we have that's been around for a while. Hinge location chart. This document okay, so I'm looking to see which document that I like the most. I don't see my original hinge location chart anywhere. Oh, here it is. So this document goes back quite some time. What we're driving at here is here's what we're driving at, and I'm studying this. This chart is for 4.5-inch hinges. It's not going to work for 5-inch hinges. Okay, so let's take a look. And it's dawned on me that I don't have the best chart here. So if you'll open up what I'm doing is I'm opening up a tab and I'm searching for SDI hinge locations, Steel Door Institute hinge and strike spacing, because I know in one of their documents they have the document I'm looking for. And that is located in the SDI publication number 129. And by the time you're seeing this video, I will have SDI publication 129 posted here. Hinge and strike spacing. And by the way, SDI, the Steel Door Institute, has dozens of what they call fact files that are the standard by which our industry is governed. I would very much recommend that you review, you go to steeldoor.org, steeldoor.org, standards. Okay, everything here, if you're new to hollow metal, you're going to want to absorb practically all of this material as you move through and into the initial stages of your career. It's what we're all referring to. Okay, so the SDI 129 publication, Hinge and Strike Spacing, has the document that I need, and here's what I'm driving at. You're going to see, let's just use Seco as an example. You know what? Let's not use Seco. I like Seco. I just want to use, that's a shame. This document is for current SDI members and doesn't reflect prior SDI members. I was looking for Kawani or Fenestra. So let's just use, we're on Mesker. Okay, let's just use Mesker. What you're going to notice here is, here's what you're going to notice. So we have Mesker. They were, I believe they still are, in Huntsville, Alabama. They're I'm familiar with their company. I distributed for them for years. I like their product. So you have 3.5-inch hinge locations, 4.5-inch hinge locations, and then 5-inch hinge locations. What we're referring to here is the E dimension. Okay, the E dimension is the inside of the header to the center line of the hinge on the jamb. What you're going to notice is that, let's just take 7.0. Well, it doesn't matter on this, but a 7.0 has an E dimension of 7.25. That means the underside of the header to the center line of the hinge is going to be 7.25 inch. Now, if you take note that when we slide down to the 5-inch, the E dimension is 7.25. Well, how can that be? Well, it's a taller hinge, but how it can be is because we're not referring to the underside of the header to the top of the hinge. The point is regardless of the height of the hinge, 4.5 or 5, or 6, or 4-inch, the center line dimension is going to stay the same. What will change is the top of the door to the top of the hinge, or the underside of the header to the top of the hinge. Okay, so what will happen here is, if you have a door prepped for a 4.5-inch hinge, the top of the door to the top of the first hinge is going to be 4 7/8. And I'm coming up with that as follows: 4 7/8. Here's how I'm coming up with that. You've got 7.25. Okay, it's a 4.5-inch hinge. Let's subtract half of that hinge height. 4.5. Sorry, 4.25. That's going to be 5-inch. So the underside of the header to the top of the hinge is 5-inch. I said the top of the door to the top of the first hinge is 4 7/8. That's because you'll have an 1/8 of an inch gap up here. Now, if we were doing a 5-inch hinge, we still have this. But now 5-inch becomes 7.25 minus 2.5. Kind of scribbled that too quickly. Let's back that up. We have 7.25 minus 2.5. Okay, that's obviously going to give us 4 3/4. So the top of the door to the top of the frame, pardon me, the underside of the header to the top of the first hinge is going to be 4 3/4. Therefore, 4 5/8 top of the door to the top of the first hinge on a 5-inch tall hinge. The point is, the top to top dimension changes, but what does not change is the center line dimension. And because this hinge, this unequal leaf hinge, okay, just a crude drawing. Okay. If we have 5-inch here, we have 4.5-inch here, it's going to be a 1/4 inch from here to here and a 1/4 inch from here to here. The center line is preserved. That's how you can use this hinge to mitigate a problem that you would have on a scenario where you've got a door or a frame prep for one size and a door or a frame prep for the other size. That's how you save the day with this hinge. Okay, so let's move back to the item description of what we're working on, which is here, and we're going to go over this material. So let's do that next. Now, as we review the item that we're looking at, it is a full mortise hinge, and we will look at the technical drawing and talk about that. This one is a non-removable hinge. It's an NRP hinge, which means there's a set screw in the barrel of the hinge that will nest into a groove prepped in the hinge pin, and when that set screw is tightened, it all but prevents that hinge pin from being removed. This is a BB1279, so that means it's a steel hinge with a steel pin, and it's a 5 by 4.5 inch hinge. Again, not to be confused with one leaf being 5 and one leaf being 4.5. The overall is 5-inch tall, 4.5 inch wide. 2060 satin chrome. This could also be called 652 finish, which means steel-based material with a satin chrome finish. Satin chrome is the most durable of all artificial finishes. A natural finish would be stainless steel with a brushed finish, but an artificial finish is where you're doing a plating or a process over a base material. This would be the most durable, satin chrome over steel. This is a standard weight hinge, and we'll look at that in a moment as well. It is a ball bearing 5-knuckle hinge. Because it's standard weight, it'll have 2 ball bearings, and they have a button tip and plug with 8 holes, and these are the size of the screws. Let's switch to the camera view quickly so that we can just go over these features. It's a full mortise hinge because you can see from the swag on the hinge leaf here and here that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. It's a steel hinge with a steel pin. The hinge pin inside of here is made of steel. Again, 5 by 4.5. The gauge is 134 thousandths, and that is odd. Yeah, it's not 134 thousandths. A 5-inch hinge is closer to 140 thousandths. My caliper is telling me that this hinge leaf is about 146 thousandths. So this is, the gauge on this is really 140 thousandths or thereabouts. Let's take a look real quick on that. Okay, and I have corrected that. The hinge leaf thickness should be 145 thousandths, 0.145. These are measuring 0.146. A 4.5 inch tall hinge would be 134 thousandths, but 5-inch get a little bit thicker, is the bottom line, which of course accounts for its ability to handle the job of carrying the door better. It's a slightly thicker hinge. It is standard weight. That is 145 thousandths for a 5-inch hinge. It is 5-knuckle. You can see the 5 knuckles. There are 2 bearing packets, and that's standard for a standard weight hinge. If you ordered this as a BB1168, it would be 190 thousandths thick and it would have 4 bearing packets. I don't know if there's an unequal heavyweight, but there probably is, and most certainly Hager is capable of manufacturing it. A button tip and plug. A button tip, use your imagination, it looks like the button on your coat. That's your plug. Okay, it's very possible that you've got maybe a 45-45% chance of having to drive that pin out and then flipping it over. You don't want the open plug at the top of the door where particulate can catch in there. This is an NRP hinge, and that's where that non-removable set screw is located. You'll want to first loosen that and then drive that pin out. Sometimes they're a rascal to get out, but they will come out with enough determination. But first, be sure to loosen that. You don't have to remove it. You can basically remove it and put it in one turn, and then do your operation. And then, of course, hole count 8. Okay, those screws that they've mentioned, it's 1224 by half. 1224 is the machine screw. That is a 1224 machine screw with a flat undercut head. Phillips drive undercut head. You can see from the profile of the head here, it's very thin. It's a very short head. That's because the flat head comes down and that is undercut. That allows the head of the screw to be flush with a thin piece of material. A true flathead would require a thicker piece of material to be flush with when it was fully inserted. It will include 12 by 1.25 inch threaded to the head wood screws. Okay. This being a ball bearing hinge is not labeled. Ball bearing hinges are in general not required to be labeled at all, although I do understand from some experts in the industry that putting a labeling showing that it is compatible with fire rating, a UL stamp, is something that some manufacturers are doing, and it's the opinion of that industry expert that it will continue through the rest of the manufacturers. There's no such labeling on here. Because this is an unusual variant, it would be very interesting to know whether or not this was a listed hinge, whether or not this was approved for use on a fire door. I'm going to go through that intellectual curiosity with the manufacturer, and I will update this profile down at the bottom. I'm just making a note there to do that. So we've covered all of the particulars. This is for use on medium weight doors with medium frequency sort of use. Now let's switch back to the screen view so we can go over and tackle the links down below showing the different aspects of this hinge. Let's switch to that now. Okay, so as we travel through the documents now, let's look at the product catalog. There won't be a lot to look at here except informational. From an informational perspective, you'll see hinges from Hager. They don't have this unequal leaf here that I can see listed at all. However, if you'd like to see the standard type of hinges, well, here they are. There may be a reference to unequal leaf somewhere here, but I don't see one. So nice to know, nice to have this information, etc. As we move through, let's look at technical drawing. That's a nice drawing. That gives you everything you need to know. It also answers the earlier question. They do make a heavyweight. The BB1168, the BB1168 is a heavyweight hinge, steel base. The BB1199 is a heavyweight hinge, non-ferrous base. That could be brass, it could be bronze, it could be stainless steel. But what's really great about this, and what's of course really nice, is it will give you all of the locations for your hinge, and in the spirit of it being a symmetrical hinge, maintaining your center line, you'll see the top of each hinge leaf to the center line of each screw is the same dimension. But because one leaf is literally a ½ inch taller than the other, you're picking up that small 1/4 inch dimension here and then down here compared to here and here. Okay. Anyway, just neat. Shows the swag on the hinge leaf here, making it a full mortise hinge. Hospital type and round corner template. So you can do a hospital type hinge on this. That probably wouldn't be unheard of. And then a round corner, that would be less common to do an RC. Let's take a look and see what that means. A hospital tip is a hinge barrel. Looking at your hinge, the side of your hinge, okay, here's what a normal hinge looks like when it's closed. A hospital tip would be this area here, where you're going to have that area is going to be aggressively ground down. Oop. Okay, so just imagine that that's all even. Okay, so they're going to grind that area down so that nothing can be placed on top of here like a belt. The intention is that anything placed on here is going to slide off. It'll be done on both sides of the hinge because the hinge is obviously reversible. That would be your HT or hospital tip. A radiused corner is obviously going to be, you're going to have your hinge leaf and you're going to have a radiused corner. So rather than a square corner, it'll be radiused. And that can be either 1/4 inch or it can be 5/8. Very uncommon. I've certainly never sold an unequal leaf radiused corner hinge. Very uncommon. Looking at the rest of everything, it'll give you this E and F dimension. Some people like to know the diameter of the barrel, and some people like to know the length of the leaf itself. So that's all there, and that's nice to have. Customer supplied hand sketch. Yeah, actually I drew this. This was a client looking for a special run of these hinges. And I, early on, prior to having the technical drawing, I made my own sketch of the hinge. Doesn't matter, it's just a sketch. Installation instruction. Okay, this doesn't apply at all. This is not an electrified hinge, and by the time you're seeing this, I will have this document removed. Let's finish up this video on camera. So in conclusion, we're looking at an unequal leaf hinge here. Nice quality product from Hager. They have literally been in business since the mid-19th century, literally. As far as I know, it's been St. Louis all of those years, even though they have a large presence in Alabama. I don't recall the city. I believe they do some manufacturing there, large warehouse distribution area that's there. The Hager logo has evolved a little bit. They've added the word USA below that hinge. In fairness to manufacturers of hinges, that's a logo. It doesn't mean this hinge is made in the United States. It may be, but it doesn't mean it is. If you need to know the country of origin on this hinge, let us know and we will find out for you. Hager has substantial manufacturing or relationships with people overseas. I don't know the country of origin of this hinge, but that logo doesn't mean this is made in the United States. It would, I could understand how it would make you certainly think that it is, and it very likely is. But I wonder if they're putting that same logo on material that's clearly imported from overseas. Nice quality hinge, and it can very likely save the day. I've never had to use this hinge for that purpose. I have sold it to many people for this exact purpose of saving the day. Because like I said earlier, I'm not aware of anyone who does this unequal leaf. Actually, I have this foggy memory that someone did order them with a new installation because they had 5-inch tall hinges. The pace of the project was long. There were several weeks and months to get everything together. But what happened was the schedule of construction was substantially shortened, where they couldn't get the doors delivered even though the frames were installed. So what they needed to do was send me temporary doors, send me the unequal leaf hinges, and when the permanent doors come in, we'll toss all of that material, the hinges and the doors, and we'll put in the permanent material. I do have memory of that happening on a job that I was involved in a peripheral sense. It was an expensive solution, but when you have, you know, $1,000 per day contract penalties, whatever the case is, all of a sudden, when you don't have very many openings and you can immediately solve it using this sort of product with then off-the-shelf doors, you know, life is good. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Hager products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I'm partial to Hager. I'm a fan of their product. I am a fan of their personnel. I've sat in a DHI class with the head of specification writing for the specifications department for Hager, was one of the instructors, and I was instantly better the moment I sat down in that chair the morning of day one, being in that gentleman's class. So to him, I say thank you. Any questions on the BB1279 5x4 Unequal leaf and an NRP and a satin chrome finish, or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.